We all have a tendency to mask our true selves behind the facade of confidence. But the truth is, our most intimate relationships are often a reflection of our deepest insecurities. At its core, this paradox is driven by a complex dynamic of seeking control and validation through the very thing that's meant to bring us connection: intimacy. We've all experienced that friend who suddenly becomes overly clingy and needy, or a partner who demands constant reassurance, and it's as if we're staring into a mirror, forced to confront our own darker impulses. In this video, we'll delve into the hidden language of vulnerability, a psychological phenomenon that reveals how people use intimacy as a form of insecurity and control, and what this can teach us about our own hidden selves. When we present ourselves as vulnerable, we're not just being open, we're negotiating a power dynamic where our perceived weaknesses are actually a strategic means to get what we want. In a desperate bid for validation, some people use their vulnerability as a form of emotional blackmail, manipulating others to provide the affection they crave. The most insidious forms of control are often disguised as intimacy, which can be a clever ruse to conceal one's genuine fear of rejection or abandonment. We're drawn to those who appear confident and unshakable, but beneath that facade, they might be hiding a deep-seated insecurity that drives their need for control or validation. Many people mistake their ego for authenticity, using vulnerability as a way to appear more attractive or relatable, rather than genuinely embracing their true selves. This can make it difficult to discern what's real and what's just a calculated ploy for attention. Through self-deception, we can convince ourselves that our actions are motivated by a desire for genuine connection, when in reality, we're using our relationships as a means to stabilize our own fragile sense of self-worth. In intimate relationships, vulnerability is often a thinly veiled attempt to seek validation, a desperate plea to be accepted and ultimately loved. We convince ourselves we're falling deeper in love when in reality, we're falling deeper into the abyss of our own insecurities. There's a peculiar dance of attraction, where we're drawn to those who have the power to soothe our deepest wounds, the very thing that also holds us hostage to their whims. As we surrender ourselves to the all-consuming fire of love, we quietly surrender a piece of our autonomy, leaving us vulnerable to manipulation, yet craving the sweet taste of control. We claim to love someone because of who they are, but the truth is, we love the reflection they create within us, the validation they provide for our own fragmented selves. In the shadow of our relationships, we're often hiding from the true depths of our own insecurities, substituting a false sense of wholeness with the fleeting high of a loving connection. When we form an emotional connection with someone, often the underlying motivator is a deep-seated need for validation, a craving for reassurance that we're worthy of love and acceptance. This dynamic can be a vicious cycle, where we surrender our autonomy in exchange for a fleeting sense of security, only to find ourselves trapped in a relationship that's suffocating our true identities. The people who are most skilled at manipulating others through emotional connection often have an insatiable appetite for control, and they'll stop at nothing to maintain their grip on the emotional strings of those around them. At its core, this type of manipulation is rooted in insecurity, a profound fear that we're not enough, that we'll be rejected or abandoned if we're not constantly seeking to validate our own worth. It's astonishing how we'll often overlook the red flags of an unhealthy relationship, choosing instead to convince ourselves that our partner's behavior is just a manifestation of their own insecurities, rather than a warning sign that we need to reevaluate the dynamic entirely. In reality, our desire for intimacy is often a double-edged sword, capable of yielding both incredible depths of connection and profound levels of control, as well do whatever it takes to stay in the warm glow of another person's affection. When we trust someone, we often feel a strange sense of obligation to reciprocate with our own vulnerability, but what we're really doing is trying to secure their trust and validate our own worth. What's often disguised as trust is actually a deep-seated need for reassurance that our emotional investment won't be met with rejection or abandonment. Some people use intimacy as a way to subtly test the waters, to see if the other person will reciprocate their emotions or to gauge their level of interest, which is less about genuine connection and more about asserting control over the relationship. When we're attracted to someone, we often mistake our desire for emotional connection with a desire for emotional control, which can lead us down a perilous path of self-deception and ultimately sabotage. Beneath the surface of even the most seemingly healthy relationships, there often lies a complex web of insecurities and fears, all of which are masquerading as trust and intimacy. And yet, despite the risks of getting hurt, many of us still find ourselves drawn to patterns of connection that perpetuate our insecurities. Because ultimately, validation is a far more powerful driver of human behavior than love or trust. When we use intimacy as a means of seeking validation and control, we're not truly vulnerable, we're merely manipulating the situation to get what we want from others. What's often misunderstood as vulnerability is actually a ploy to hook someone's attention and hold on to it with our insecurities and neediness, and that's an insidious way of exerting power over them. Underneath our attempts to control and dominate others through intimacy lies a deep-seated fear of rejection, of being found unworthy, and of being abandoned, which stems from our own sense of inadequacy and self-doubt. The language of self-deception is always subtle, and it's easy to convince ourselves that our insecurities are a sign of genuine intimacy, when in reality we're merely trying to fill the void within ourselves by projecting our own vulnerabilities onto someone else. People often claim to be falling in love with someone's authenticity, but what they are actually drawn to is a reflection of themselves, and by extension, a means of escaping the discomfort and anxiety of their own insecurities. In these moments, our craving for validation, our drive for control, and our desperation for connection become interchangeable with one another, and we can't help but use the currency of vulnerability to buy into a sense of security and intimacy that's inherently unsustainable. As we conclude our exploration into the hidden language of vulnerability, remember that true intimacy requires embracing our insecurities rather than utilizing them as a means of control. I encourage you to reflect on the ways in which you've seen this dynamic play out in your own life and relationships. Share your observations with me in the comments below, and subscribe for more in-depth dives into the complexities of human psychology.